I'm going to go at lightning pace because I have a ton to cover with you. And I'm going to be brutally real, as I always am with all of you. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything tonight. I'm going to say it like it is because that's what I believe that you need to hear. In other words, I'm not here to say nice things to you. I'm here to equip you to be successful. As your coach, I take that responsibility very seriously. And so, I don't like to kind of piddle paddle around the heart of an issue. I want to get to the core of the issue. And the core of this issue is that I feel like a lot of people have made success a lot more complicated, a lot more complex, a lot more deep than what it really needs to be. We talk a lot about positive thinking, and we talk a lot about just all of these kind of abstract concepts. But the reality is that really every single thing that I'm going to share with you, every single one of these habits that I see in common in all of the 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs that I have relationships with, these are all a choice for you. That means that you get to make a decision whether you are going to adopt them and implement them and act on them and use them and develop these in your own life, or you're not. This is a choice. Success as an entrepreneur is not like being an athlete. It's not like, let's say, being born with certain genetic gifts, whether it be height or weight or the ability to develop a certain type of muscle, skeletal muscle if you're a bodybuilder, right? It has nothing to do with you being blessed with phenomenal genetics. It also has nothing to do with you being blessed with incredible skills like sales skills or marketing skills or some innate charisma or the ability to speak or the ability to write or the ability to present or any of those things. Being an entrepreneur and being successful as an entrepreneur is so much about really comes down so much to what you choose to do and what you choose not to do. And I don't just mean on a day-to-day. I don't just mean in terms of productivity and time management. I mean whether you choose to accept that you are in charge or not. Like whether you choose to realize that all of these habits, it really just comes down to you to say yes or no to these habits. And at the end of the day, I sit back and I see a lot of people on social media. I see a lot of folks that talk about their dreams and talk about being successful. And they take a victim's mentality for why it's not going to happen for them. Or the thing that I hate more than anything is when they point the finger and they say, yeah, but you're Todd Brown. And so of course you can be successful because you're Todd Brown. Oh, Todd, you've got a great reputation. Or, oh, Todd, you've got all these connections, right? Or Todd, you've got all this clout and respect in them. Oh, Todd, you've got all of this, this capital that you can, oh, you're full time. So you could, but the reality is that I've always said this, right? I've said this from day one, that the top 2% in any market, the best of the best, at one point was the bottom 2%. The folks that know, quote unquote, know it all today, the folks that many of you would view as the experts, the pinnacle, at one point were just beginners. At one point were just newbies. At one point knew nothing. Like the reality, like that whole attitude of, yeah, but you're Todd, that you're Russell Brunson, you're Ryan Dice, right? You're Frank Kern. That pisses me off so much because the reality is that I brought nothing to the table. I brought nothing to the table, and the overwhelming majority of marketers and successful 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs that I know brought nothing to the table. Many of you know my story. Right? My story. So I was a terrible student in middle school, in high school. I was diagnosed when I was in middle school with a learning disability. And so like I was thrilled on my report cards when I got a C. I didn't read a full book from cover to cover until I was in my early 20s. When I applied to college, like I got terrible grades the whole way through. When I applied to college, I applied to, I think it was 5 schools. I got denied, turned down by all of them. I had to go to community school where it took me 3 years to get a 2-year degree. And then I went on to college. I finally got into Montclair State. It took me another 3 years to finish my 4-year degree. It took me 6 years to get a 4-year degree. And then I started, my first job, right, was I was making $8.50 an hour. Right, when I launched my first business or when I launched my kind of career in direct response marketing, I started with $850. That was it. And I had a full-time job and I had 2 little girls, 2 toddlers at home under the age of 3, 17 months apart. Like the reality is, and then let me tell you something, and let me say this, and let me get brutally real with you guys and gals, and brutally honest with you. So along the way, right, like I had heart attack, a fluke heart attack, like that they still couldn't figure out what was from. I'm not like a heavy drinker. I don't smoke. I'm not, I'm not overweight. I mean, I could certainly stand to lose 15 pounds or something, right? But we lost my wife Kelly lost her mother and father within an 8-month period, right? 3 years ago to a tragedy. I lost my father. Like, so when I hear folks talk about obstacles and things standing in their way, like, and that's why they can't achieve success, it's all nonsense. It all comes down to a choice. Now, before we dive into the first of these common habits, I want to share a story with you. My buddy Rich Schefren had a conversation with Tony Robbins. Many of you may know Rich Schefren. He's called or referred to as the guru to the gurus. He's coached guys like Jeff Walker and Ryan Dice and Frank Kern and Mike Filsaime. He's worked on many projects with Jay Abraham, and he's the guy that introduced me to Mark Ford and Clayton Makepeace and John Carlton and whatnot. And so Rich was having a conversation with Tony Robbins one day, and Tony, they were talking about learning. They were talking about being exposed to trainings like this and reading books and really just learning. And Tony said something that is so important for you to grasp as we're about to dive into this first habit. And Tony said to Rich, Tony said, you know the difference between you and I, Rich? He said, Rich, is that you learn for learning's sake. You learn to learn. You learn, Rich, because you like learning. He said, I learn to change my behavior. I learn to change my actions. And that's my hope for you guys and gals tonight. That you don't simply hear this stuff, that you don't simply let it go in one ear and out the other, but that you commit to taking action on this because it is a choice, which is the perfect segue into into the first habit. And the first habit is this, is that the most successful entrepreneurs I know are doers. They are action takers, right? They have this action orientation. They have this bias towards action. They're not talkers, right? They're doers. I don't mean necessarily that they don't contemplate, that they don't have thinking time, that they don't strategize. That the best of the best that I know do. The best of the best that I know schedule that thinking time and contemplation time. But the reality is that the best of the best that I know, they take action, and they ferociously take action. They don't wait until they have a perfect understanding of the task at hand. They don't wait until they see the full path from beginning to whoops, I think I lost my audio. Let's see. All right, it looks like my audio cut out. Sorry about that, guys. Let's see. All right. If it cuts out again, I'll have to keep an eye on that. But so I was just saying that, and I'm recording this. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm recording this. Let me just make sure I'm recording this on. Hang on one second. Let me make sure I'm recording this on my end. Yes, I am. Okay. I was just going to say, make sure that I'm recording this through my mic so that if any part uh, is lost, it'll be recorded on my end. But I forget where I left off, but I was just saying that you have to take action, and you have to be relentless with taking action. I could tell you that, and this is, and let me say this. Let me take a step back for 1 second and say this, that these habits are in no particular order. In fact, I went back about 20 minutes before we started, and I mixed up the order so that there is no, like, I don't want you to think that each one builds on one another. I wanted to really keep you guys engaged by mixing up the order of these habits. I say that only because if there was one thing that I have seen hold back more entrepreneurs than, somebody asked for me to show, hang on. This is the first slide. Here's the we're on the first habit right now. But if there was one thing that I've seen hold back more entrepreneurs, more aspiring online marketers and whatnot, it's this. It's a lack of action. It's like, and I'll tell you, right? Like I said to you, right? It's a week goes by and they've done nothing, or a month goes by and they're still working on their VSL, right? Or it takes them 4 days to put up a web page, right? Things that are really today inexcusable with how easy things have become. Understand, when I first started, right, 15 years ago, there not only were there no tools like ClickFunnels and Lead Pages and Optimize Press and Samcart and all these different tools, there was no WordPress. There wasn't even any content management system back then. Today, it's never been easier than it is right now when it comes to marketing online. Right? There are more traffic generation opportunities or more traffic channels than ever before. There are YouTube videos on virtually everything that you can imagine. And so it's baffling to me how many marketers are simply just not action oriented, right? And I love the way Ryan Holiday, author of The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, said it. And he said that most people want the noun without the verb. How great is that? Most people want the noun without the verb. They want the successful business without doing the work, right? Without doing the business. It's kind of like they want to be a writer, a noun, without writing, right? That's really what Ryan was saying. They want the result without the work. The reality is that you've got to implement, you've got to execute, you've got to take action on the things that you learn. There is no value in learning simply for learning's sake, right? Within this context of being a successful entrepreneur. It's all about what you do with that learning, what you do with that information, and how you take action on it. And the thing to understand is this, that you might say like, well, I'm not going to do that webinar because I don't really feel like I don't feel ready for that. I don't feel like I'm a webinar, presenter, or I'm not going to write copy because like I'm still going to study and learn copy, right? I'm going to wait until I feel like I've got the chops to write copy. Well, I want you to remember this. I want you to write this down, and I want you to remind yourself of this when push comes to shove. And that is that it's motion before emotion. It's motion before emotion. What that means is that you don't wait until you feel like an exerciser to start exercising. You start exercising and then you feel like an exerciser. You don't wait until you feel like you're ready to write copy, or you feel like you're ready to record a VSL. You record the VSL and you do it again and again. And over time, you'll develop the emotions associated with that. It's motion before emotion. And the last thing that I want to say about this action orientation is just this, that the best of the best that I know focus not only on implementation and execution, but they focus on the speed of implementation and execution. That means that they recognize that there is value in speed, that there is greater value in implementing something quickly than there is in implementing something slowly. And so when you get an idea, you should be looking at how quickly can I go from idea to fully implemented and executed in my business. And your goal, your objective is to develop that speed, to get quicker at going from idea to implementation. The next habit is kind of what seems like a cliche, but it really is. It really does operate this way, and that is that the most successful of my buddies, of again 7-8 figure entrepreneurs, is that they truly do value their time in dollars. They guard their, and I want you to listen to this carefully. They guard their time. They protect their time. They nurture their time as if it was money. Think about to the extent that you go, and this should bring it all into light for you. Think about all that you do to protect your property. If you own a home, if you own a condo, if you own a town, if you own a car, a truck, a vehicle, right? You've got possessions, whether it's, whatever, a television, radio, your phone, and of course, and you've got money. And what do you do, right, to protect? What measures do you put in place? How vigilant are you when it comes to protecting your property, your possessions, your money? Right? If you're at all like most people, you go to great lengths to make sure that you don't leave the house for the day and leave your front door unlocked, right? You don't leave your wallet on your front, on your car seat when you go into to the store or whatever it is, right? You take care, you nurture, you guard these things that are important to you, that have value in your eyes. Well, how much more valuable is your time? It's really the only asset that you cannot replace. It's the only thing out of property, possessions, money, those things you can all make more of. I know for some of you that are at the kind of the beginning of your journey, it might seem weird to think like you can always make more money, and you will always make more money. Especially everybody on here that's going through the E5 Camp Masterclass, you are developing the ability, the skills, the mindset that is more valuable than any other skills, ability, mindset that you can adopt or that you can have or that you could gain as an entrepreneur. Well, like, how are you guarding your time? Are you allowed, and we're going to be talking about this on Wednesday, but like, are you valuing your time in dollars? And understand that what I mean by that is, I just mean that, like, the reality is, look, you got to keep yourself in check. You got to be honest with yourself when it comes to how you're spending your time, because we all have 24 hours in a day, right? And one of my original mentors used to say to everybody, he always used to say to us that people find the time and the money for things that are most important to them. And so here, what are you doing to guard your time? Because the most successful folks that I know, man, they place a dollar value on their time. And I don't mean, like, I want you to understand something here. I'm not talking about like, that just means like if they can either stand around and chat with, somebody over the water cooler, so to speak, for 30 minutes, or they could go home and spend 30 minutes of quality time with their spouse, right? Or their children, right? Or they could read, or they could go out and volunteer, right? Or they go to a midweek church service, or, right? Or you understand that there's a value to that time, and they understand, right, how they should be investing their time to get the greatest value. And so, second habit that I really want to stress to you. The third one is kind of, you've heard it no doubt 1,001 times, but I want to mention this, right? And so the third habit is that they've got a clear vision, right? And that just means that a clear vision is all about this. Think about, because for the longest time, I personally struggled with really understanding what was meant by vision as an entrepreneur, vision as a business owner, vision really just as an individual. But vision is really just the ability for you to see a future time, a time in the future, in as much detail as possible, right? Vision is when you can see a time in the future, a future time in as much detail as possible. Well, the most successful entrepreneurs I know have a clear vision. They know exactly what it is that they are trying to build. They're not only driven by goals. They're not only driven by metrics. They're not only driven by aspirations. They're driven by a clear vision. They know exactly what it is that they're trying to create for themselves, and they know they have this clear vision for their life across the board. So like look, the reality is this: there are a lot of successful entrepreneurs out there, and there are a lot of successful entrepreneurs with banged up families, with broken marriages, with several broken marriages, with relationships with their children that are totally just damaged. Right? That's not the aim. That's not the goal for anybody on here. And so you want to make sure that you've got this vision for not just your business, but where does your business fit into your overall vision? And can you articulate and detail that and lay out that vision for where you're going, for what you're painting, for what you are creating in as much detail as possible? Can you see it? Can you smell it? Can you hear it? Can you taste it? Right? Like, and so you've just got to be clear, right? What you don't want to do is you don't want to show up every day and get caught in the minutia of the what to do, right? Like what should I do today? What am I supposed to do today? What marketing tactics? What am I executing simply from a business building perspective? You want to make sure that the picture that you are painting, that you're creating, that you're orchestrating, that you're engineering is you're clear about it. And that's the last thing that I'm going to say about this is that understand that as an entrepreneur that you get today more so than ever before, you get to engineer the life that you want. It doesn't have to be by anybody else's rules, right? Like, and I know that sounds cliche, but I really want you to think about it because every one of the most successful entrepreneurs I know understand that. They get it. They get that, like, you know what? If you're trying to build a business based on somebody else's vision, you're not going to have the motivation. You're not going to have the passion. You're not going to have the stick-to-itiveness, right, to go through the obstacles, the ups and downs, the valleys before the peaks. And you will have them because every entrepreneur does. Instead, you've got to decide in an ideal, perfect world, if there were no constraints, what does that vision look like for you? And so that is the third habit. The fourth habit is 100% responsibility. 100% responsibility. And the reason why I have a picture of Rudy Giuliani, for those of you that don't know who this is, right? That's Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of New York City. Rudy Giuliani was the mayor of New York City during September 11th, during 9/11, the worst terrorist attack on American soil, right, ever. And after, Rudy Giuliani led the he led the police department and fire department through, one of the worst times in the United States. And afterwards, Rudy Giuliani published a book. Now, at the time, I was working for a different company. I was working for a company in the fitness business. That's where I had started, and I was still there. And we read a book as a company, and the book that we read was Rudy Giuliani's, it was leadership, Giuliani on leadership, something like that. You could go to Amazon and find it. And one of the things that Giuliani said in there immediately stood out to me, and then and after it stood out to me, I began later on to see it in so many of the successful entrepreneurs that I met, and it reminded me of reading it in Giuliani's book. And the story goes like this, that Rudy Giuliani had this placard on his desk, a little plaque on his desk. And the plaque said this. It said, I'm responsible. I'm responsible. And that just means that as an entrepreneur, you need to take 100% responsibility. You can't point the finger at anything else. You can't blame anything or anyone else. You've got to take 100% responsibility. Anything less than 100% responsibility for your situation, for your scenario, for your outcome, for for how well your marketing is doing, for anything and everything in your business, anything less allows you to take a victim's mentality. And none of my successful friends I've ever heard them use or utter any words, victim mentality words, right? If you point the finger, if something happens with your internet connection, it's not the internet, it's not the cable company's fault, right? Because you could have switched to a different provider. You could have done more research. You could have had a backup. If you have an employee or somebody on your team that drops the ball and botches something, it's not their fault. It's not their doing. You made a bad hire. Maybe it's right. You made a bad hire. Maybe it's that you didn't beef up your recruiting process. You didn't beef up your interviewing process. You didn't beef up what it is that you were doing, right? If your website goes down in the middle of a marketing campaign and it's because you were hacked, it's not the hacker's fault. It's not the server company's fault because you could have chosen a different server company. You could have switched hosts. You could have had a backup. You could have put measures in place, right? If you hired a copywriter to do your promo and your promo bombs, it's not that, don't blame it. Don't point the finger at the copywriter, because then what you do is you allow yourself to become the victim in that scenario, that you're a victim of that copywriter. You're a victim of their poor copywriting skills. And that's not the way you need to operate as a as an entrepreneur, right? You've got to recognize that you're in control. And the reality is this, that it equips you, right? Because if you're not in control, if you're not responsible, then you can't exhibit change. Like, in other words, you can't change. If you're not 100% responsible for something, then you can't change that thing, because the thing changing is partly reliant on something or someone else, right? And so it puts you in a position of vulnerability. It puts you in a position of a victim. No, you are 100% responsible. And when you develop that, when you cultivate that mindset, it will be incredibly liberating for you. It will be scary at first, but trust me, it will be incredibly liberating, right? And I love the quote. I think I first heard this from Dan Kennedy, but I can't remember now. I've shared it with my team numerous times. And that is this: you can either be good at making excuses or you can be good at making money, but you cannot be good at both. Period. Right? When I hear, like, I tell my team all the time, when I ask for an update on something, I don't want an excuse or rationalization or justification for why it wasn't done. I'm not asking, right, was it done? If not, tell me why. Like, I'm not asking why it wasn't done, because the answer is always, it's either a rationalization, a justification, or an excuse. As an entrepreneur, you can either be good at making those excuses, making those justifications for rationalizing your I didn't feel good. I was tired, right? I didn't get a lot of sleep. I've been sick I had to work a double, right? I'm out of money. All of those things are excuses, because other entrepreneurs have been in your position and have gone on to be successful. And so you just have to remember that. You just have to realize that 100% responsibility and nothing less. The next one is, and I'm going to keep cruising. I know that for some folks, it looks like my audio is banged up, and it could be my internet, which is my fault for not updating to a better. I'm just kidding. But I'm recording the whole thing, and so you'll be able to go back and watch this bad boy at 2x speed. We'll probably even put up the audio as well for you guys. But let me keep cruising. Number 5 is what I would refer to as a success consciousness. And I'm not talking about any kind of new age thing. I'm not a believer in any of that. I'm not a believer in the law of attraction the way it was presented in The Secret. Certainly, I'm a believer in, like, look, you get what you focus on, right? That, like, I just think it reminds me in a lot of ways, just as a side note, of like when you go for a motorcycle license. For those of you that ride a motorcycle, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The funny thing with a motorcycle is you go where you look. Right? Like, on a motorcycle, it's like you go where you look. If you're looking at a tree, you're running into that tree. And so, excuse me. So you go where you look. And so that's the area that, that's how if there was a part of the law of attraction, that's the only part that I would say, right? Other than that, this is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here with success consciousness is that the most successful entrepreneurs, they focus on and they think about the positive, right? They think about the success. They think about the achievement of the goal or the task. Meaning, they don't think about like look, and this is so important, and so get this, right? They don't think about, well, what happens if I invest in these Facebook ads and it doesn't work? Right? They think about, well, what happens if I invest in these Facebook ads and it does work? What happens if I run this campaign and it does work? Not what happens if I send out this email and a lot of people unsubscribe, or if I send out this email and no one buys. They think about, well, what if I send out this email and tons of people buy? What if I publish my book and it becomes a bestseller? Not what if I publish my book and it flops? And so it's focusing on the upside, not the downside. Focusing on the positive, the success, and in a scenario, and not the failure, right? And 2 other things that I would add on top of this. And please listen to me. In line with this is they don't care what others think. They truly don't care what others think. Like, in other words, and I could share this because for a while, I like for a while I cared, like, what would others think? What are others going to think if like this isn't good marketing? Or what are others going to think if the quality of the video sales letter isn't that good? Or what are others going to think if my images just don't look so well? Or what are others going to think, right, if this fails? Well, the reality is that you've got to start to recognize that like, number one, the most successful don't care, right? That's a choice. That's a choice, right? That really is a choice. You can choose not to, like, you could choose to say, well, it would stink if I looked like a fool, but I'm going to act anyway, right? Like, I'm going to take steps forward anyway. It's why, just as a side note, and this is worth writing down, it's why I love in the book Who Moved My Cheese, one of the all-time best-selling books. It's like on the top 50 books with the most amount of books sold. I love the idea in that little book of what would you do if you weren't afraid? What would you do if you weren't afraid? In any situation where maybe you're afraid of what somebody else is going to think, or what somebody else is going to say, or how you'd be viewed, or what would happen if it doesn't work, or if it doesn't, right? Like, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Right? Like, ask yourself that question and then do that, period. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Then do that, right? And that's the kind of the other thing. I said there were two kind of sub things underneath this success consciousness. And that is, like, you can't be afraid to quote unquote fail. You can't be afraid to quote unquote embarrass yourself, right? Like, there is none of that. You've got to want success more than you fear embarrassment, more than you fear humiliation, more than you fear public failure. I've said it before, my buddy, Russell Brunson, many of you may know Russell is the founder of ClickFunnels, phenomenal marketer, really successful entrepreneur. He's one of the most, for me, he's one of my favorite entrepreneurs. He's one of my favorite entrepreneurs because because first of all, I like the guy a lot. Like, he and I are friends. He's a good guy, super smart, runs a great business, really cares. But you know what? The guy has had more public, quote unquote, more public failures than possibly any other entrepreneur I know of. But the guy has gotten up every time and has moved forward. And he doesn't care. He's willing to take a swing at the bat. He's willing to get up to the plate. And that's the same thing that you need to do. You can't be afraid of failing. You can't be afraid of embarrassing yourself. You can't care what others think. At the end of the day, they're not going to be there to take care of your family for you. Right? They're not going to be there. Those people that you care so much about, right? They're not going to be there. They don't care whether you, right? They right? At the end of the day, they hope you fail, right? Because misery loves company. You've got to recognize that there are certain things that you should care about, and most others you shouldn't. That's the reality. And focus on the what if this works? What if this is successful? What if this happens? Like, the positive, not the negative. In line with that, or just really second to that, is what I would call a positive self-expectancy. And a positive self-expectancy is very simple. This comes from, I first saw this, and then, like, I first learned this, and then, like I said, I was reminded of it many moons later when seeing it in so many of the folks that I was meeting as I started meeting more and more successful entrepreneurs. This came from a great book called The Psychology of Winning by Dennis Waitley. It was the first personal development book that I ever read that really kind of just got me sucked into to this whole world of personal development. Great book. Like, you get it for like $5, paperback, really, an old book. But it's this idea that, like, the most successful entrepreneurs I know expect themselves to perform well, not poorly. They expect that when the ball is thrown that they're going to hit it. They don't get up to the plate expecting that they're going to strike out, right? They don't launch a campaign expecting it to fail. They don't set up a VSL expecting it to flop. They don't send out an email expecting that nobody is going to read it. They don't reach out to a variety of potential joint venture partners and expect that nobody's going to partner with them, right? They expect that they are going to perform well. That's not pie in the sky. Like what I really mean, like for me, at least for me personally, what I'll tell you is that this is more about what it is that I am responsible for in any scenario, what it is that I am doing, meaning what it is that I am in control of. If I'm in control of sending out an email, right? If I'm in control of giving a webinar, if I'm in control of giving a presentation on stage, right? I'm not in control of how the audience receives it. I'm not in control of like whether if I pick up the phone and I call a joint venture partner, I'm not in control of whether they're going to pick up on the other end. But what I am in control of is my delivery, is my performance, is my mindset, is my attitude, is my energy. And the most successful entrepreneurs I know expect themselves to perform. And a lot of these, again, this is a choice. This is a habit that you develop, right? This isn't something that, like, don't buy into the nonsense, guys and gals, that you either have this or you don't. Like, you're not a victim of your own self-esteem. You're not a victim of your own self-awareness. You're not a victim of your own self-expectancy. You can develop it by continuing to practice, telling yourself, expecting that I'm going to do well. I'm going to do well. I'm going to give a great webinar. I'm going to write a great email. I'm going to give a great presentation. I'm going to conduct a great phone call. And so positive self-expectancy. Habit number 6. Habit number 7 is what I call a long time horizon. It's playing the long game. It's not being short-sighted. It's not, right? Meaning that really in this context, it's the most successful entrepreneurs that I'm around, that I'm friends with. Number one, they are always thinking ahead. And typically they're thinking years ahead. They're not necessarily thinking 20 or 15 years ahead, but they're certainly thinking a year, 2 years ahead. They're willing to make deposits today for withdrawals that they're not going to make for possibly weeks, months, it maybe in some cases years, and the reality is this, that the average individual, that's the reason why the average individual has no money in savings or is unable to retire comfortably in their golden years is because they live short-sighted. They don't have a long time horizon. They don't practice delayed gratification. They're not willing to make deposits into an account that they're not going to touch for years and years and years, that they're not going to make a withdrawal on for years and years and years. There are lots of aspects of growing a successful business that require delayed gratification. Not everything. I know we live in this instant society of like, I want instant results. Like I push a button and get an instant result on Facebook, or I could send out an email and get sales within just 15 minutes. And right, I know that but the reality is that there are so many things behind the scenes as it relates to building a business that require delayed gratification, right? Things like, for example, there's an aspect of content marketing, to just touch on that for a second. That's a long game. It's a long game. Even doing things like posting to videos to YouTube, that's a long game. Developing relationships and not asking for anything, making deposits. I've done that for years. I've done that for individuals with years. I've done it where I just made deposits and never even had a plan on making any kind of withdrawal. But if the time does come, I know that I'll be able to. Right? Like, and so it is, it's this principle of dig the well before you thirst. And so you've got to recognize that certainly developing relationships is a long-term game. Certainly, things like I said, content marketing, SEO, any of those kind of things, long-term game. Even oftentimes there are aspects of developing your team. Your team, the folks that you surround yourself with, that's a long-term game. You're pouring into them. Like I'm a big believer in as it relates to developing a team, like there's a huge difference between leadership and management and being a manager, right? Managing is all about systems. Leadership is all about people. And I'm a big believer in leadership, even in an entrepreneurial business, right? Leadership, part of that is pouring into people. Is giving, is helping people develop skills, is recognizing that I'm going to start pouring into somebody today, knowing that that's not necessarily going to come to fruition for maybe 10 months, for 8 months, for maybe a year and a half, right? But being willing to take this long time horizon. Certainly, same thing with Same thing with practicing certain skills, right? Like, you've got to be willing to, like if you're developing your skill writing copy, that's not gonna happen overnight. It's not going to be tomorrow or even next week or even next month that you're a freaking copywriting pro. But if you're willing to pay your dues, right, and continue to put in the time, over time, you will develop that. And finally, certainly, it is, you can see it in terms of investing, whether that's financially investing in yourself, in your business, investing in your reputation. Reputation is one of those things where, like I'll give you an example, just as a side note. I tell my team all the time, I hate it when stuff is published under my name without me proofing it. Right. And it rarely happens today. 99% of what gets published with my name on it is written by me. But I hate it because I've said to my team before, there's going to come a time in the future where I'm all I'm going to have is my reputation. Maybe I'll sell marketing funnel automation, or maybe I'll feel like, hey, I've reached the end of my journey in this particular space, and now I want to move on to something else. And I'm going to have my reputation, and so that's the kind of thing that you've got to manage over the long term. You can't, right? You've got a now and long time horizon. So enough about that. That is habit 7. Habit 8 is self-discipline. And this is simple. This has always been my favorite definition of any word. And that is that self-discipline is this. It's all about you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as somebody who's trying to grow something that is going to give you the life and lifestyle, the vision, right, that you want. It's all about doing what you're supposed to do when you are supposed to do it, regardless of how you feel. And the most important part of that definition, the most important part of that habit, and again, it's a habit. It's not, right. It's not a talent. It is something that you can develop and you can get better at it. Like I would look at this and think about it like this, right? Procrastination is like an addiction. And the more the more frequently you procrastinate, or the more you allow yourself to procrastinate, the easier it becomes. The more of a hold on you it has, right? And we could talk about all the studies related to neurochemicals, brain chemicals, but just look at it that way. Every time you give in to procrastination, that is a choice, and you are strengthening your procrastination muscles. Every time you resist that, and every time you exhibit self-discipline, you get stronger in that area, right? It's not something you're born with. It's something that you can choose to cultivate and develop. And the most important part of the definition, like I started to say, is, right, it's do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, regardless of how you feel. It's not just do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it when you feel like doing it, right? That's everybody does that. Right? It's doing what you are supposed to do when you are supposed to do it, regardless of how you feel, regardless of whether you're tired, regardless of whether you lack motivation, regardless of whether you have inspiration, regardless of whether you're afraid, regardless of whether you know the next 6 steps, right? You do what you are supposed to do when you are supposed to do it, regardless of how you feel, and you choose that, and you face that reality every time you are faced with an option, or every time you are contemplating, I'm not going to do it, right? I'm not going to do it. And one of the things that I learned early on, just as a side note to help you with this, right? One of the things I've told my wife this often, when, let's say, you wake up to work out in the morning, let's say, maybe, just as an example, one of the absolute worst things that you can do is engage in an internal dialogue with yourself about, oh, it's cold out, or it's raining, or you know what, I was up last night in the middle of the night, or I ate like garbage yesterday and so I'm going to skip a day, or I've got a lot to do today, right? Yada, yada. That dialogue, the moment that you begin to engage in that dialogue, you've got to stop yourself, because you are going to lose that debate. You are going to lose that debate. You cannot allow yourself to get into that internal dialogue. You have to recognize, if I'm supposed to do, right, I'm supposed to do this, and I'm supposed to do this now, right? I either have a choice. I either give in to procrastination and let this addiction continue to, right, like feed the beast, so to speak, or I can take an action and do what it is that I'm supposed to do. And that's it. I'm going to leave that dangling out there for you, and I want you to really think about that later on. Next habit number 9, is The most successful entrepreneurs I know, they have a purpose and they're passionate about that purpose, right? And you've heard this before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And here's the thing, like, yes, this is a picture of Habitat for Humanity, but maybe for you, your reason why is you. Maybe your reason why is autonomy. You just want to be able to get up when you want, eat when you want, do what you want with who you want. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no judgment here of what that purpose is, of what that reason why is. I don't want you to think that you've got to have some big, bold, like, purpose of changing the world and of feeding the poor. I think that that's great if you do. And I think that in some cases, I think that for those of you that are extremely young, I think that your purpose will evolve over time. I know that mine certainly has, but everybody I know has a strong reason why. And it's that why that keeps them going during the difficult times. It's the why that when you're faced with an obstacle, or when you're in one of the many valleys, the peaks and valleys, when you're in one of the many valleys of growing a successful business, you have a strong reason why to get up and go forward. The other thing is that I've seen lots of entrepreneurs get burnt out, where they get burnt out from working on their business, working in their business. And the reality is that more often than not, it's because they took their eye off of the why. They forgot why. They got caught. I like to say, and I tell my team this, right? They focus on the what instead of the why. They focus on what they need to do. Here's what I need to do today. Here's what I need to do in terms of content marketing. Here's what I need to do in terms of, hiring, right? It's the what they need to do instead of the why. You gotta have a reason why. And I don't care whether it is like, look, I'm not here to judge. It doesn't matter whether it's completely self-serving or not, but you got to know why you're doing this, and you got to get in tune with that. And if you don't know, if you're not clear on why, like what is so important to you about building a business? Why does it mean everything to you? Or like, why is it so important? What is it going to allow you to do? What is not building your business, not growing a successful business going to stop you from doing, right? And like I said, this is not, right? I'm not talking about putting a pair of sneakers on everybody that's shoeless. That's great if that's your purpose. But it could also be completely self-serving and it still have the same power and drive for you. You gotta find it. You gotta spend time thinking that through, and you gotta identify it, and you gotta keep that out in front of you, because the most successful entrepreneurs, the 7- and 8-figure earners that I know, all are driven by a passionate purpose. Next is, excuse me, habit number 10, very simple, is all the most successful entrepreneurs I know are avid students. They're just avid learners. They are, I can tell you that I read more today than I ever have in my life. I know my buddy Rich Schefren has a library that is like everybody I know that has achieved tremendous things is just an avid learner. I even, again, and I don't mean to continue to harp on my own team, but look, I want to be real and authentic with you. It blows my mind when, look, you have to ask yourself this. You always have to ask yourself, what is it that I need to know next to move myself one step forward, right? Like what is it that I need to know? Not what is it that I'll ever need to know? Not what is it that I'll need to know a year from now, or what is it that I'll need to know in 6 months from now? But what is it that I need to know next? Right? Another thing that you can ask yourself is, what one skill, if I developed even more, would have the biggest impact on my business, would have the biggest impact on my ability to earn? Is it copywriting? Is it doing webinars? Is it hiring? Right? Like, what one skill set, right? Because and look, there is always one skill set that is more of a kind of, will have a bigger impact, right? A bigger leverage point than any other skill set. You'll always have that, right? Because when it's kind of like looking for the weakest link in a chain, right? There's always one weakest link. When you identify the weakest link, right? And remember that if there are 10 skill sets that look, let me take a step back. When you identify the weakest link in a chain and you strengthen that weakest link, there's now another weakest link. There's always one weakest link in a chain. And so you have the ability, and we apply that, like you guys are learning and you're about to learn, right? Like more about how we apply that to finding the constraint in a funnel. Well, the same thing with your skill set. Only here, what we're asking is what one skill, if I developed it or developed it more, would have the greatest impact on my business, on my ability to earn, on my ability to grow, and or right, what is it that I need to know right now to take the very next step in my journey, in my blueprint, in my plan. My buddy Rich Schefren used to talk about. He used to call it the difference between just in case learning and just in time learning. Just in case is like, hey, one day I'm going to want to know how to do Bing or, use Bing advertising, right? But just in time is now, is what do I need to know now? And I can tell you, like I said, that everybody I know that's successful, even the best of the best, folks like Mark Ford, crazy, just reader. My gosh, my buddy Joe Schriefer growing, Agora Financial to almost $200 million this year. Just avid students, consumers of information. And so kind of common sense, but you gotta grow. You gotta be an avid student, especially of this game. And that's another thing. Let me say this, just as a quick aside. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, just because it's real, and I want you to hear it. That so many people, they think Todd's a genius. How many times? How often I'm referred to as a genius marketer? And yeah, it's flattering. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't flattering. But what's baffling to me is that everything I know, I've learned, right? And it's available to you. Whether it's through me and through, through the E5Cam Masterclass, as well as Elevate, and through our other programs, and through MFA Live coming up in October. But it's also available through, there are various books from legends like, Gene Schwartz and Robert Collier. The point is that these are learnable skills. Period. Learnable skills. Being an entrepreneur is not like being a singer or dancer, where there is a portion that is all about talent, God-given talent. This is not. Trust me, it is not. Next, to just keep cruising here. Next is the most successful are constantly looking for leverage. They're constantly looking for leverage in their life and in their business. And I'm going to give you a unique perspective on this in just 1 second. But right, leverage is all about, they're constantly looking for, to give more specific examples, they're constantly looking for ways to do things once and benefit from it multiple times. They're constantly looking for ways to create one piece of content and use that content 5 different ways, or create a piece of content, right? Create a product and sell that product 5 different ways. They're constantly looking for ways to do something once and then figure out how to valuably recycle it over and over and over. They're also looking for leverage in other people's time, in other people's money, in other people's exertion, right? It's why, and it took me a little bit of time resisting this, but to learn the value of a great team. The value of a great team, right? Like, there's a huge difference between being self-employed and building a business, right? There's a tremendous difference between being self-employed, right? Like owning and operating your own business, and being, and building a business, right? A dentist, for example, who is providing the dental care. Well, if that dentist gets sick, right? Really sick for a month, there's no money coming in. If that dentist goes on vacation for 3 weeks, there's no money coming in. That's not a business. That's the dentist is self-employed. Right? The dentist is his or her own boss. Very different from building a business. A business is an entity that can operate, can thrive, can grow without you, right? And in order to do that, you need to find leverage. You need to be able to leverage other people's time, other people's effort, and so on. Another unique perspective on this to just throw out for time purposes, and I don't want to get too advanced here, but is, and just mark this down and ponder this later, but is looking for leverage in things like turning expenses. How can you turn expenses into a profit center? How could you turn expenses, an expense, into a profit center. Let me give you an example for 1 second. So we're getting ready to begin to open up the registration for MFA Live. It's our annual event in October. I think we've got, like a third of the tickets already, claimed, something like 200 tickets that have already been claimed. But so one of the things that we're going to be doing as part of that is we're going to be sending out some campaigns to the people that have already registered, the people that have already gotten their ticket, their seat for MFA Live, as part of, like to remind them of the value that they're going to get, remind them of everybody they're going to see speak there and all the presentations and yada, yada, yada. Well, so I had this idea of, well, wouldn't it be great if we sent stuff in the mail, right? Like if we sent, like kind of like a synopsis of some of the great ideas that they're going to be hearing from each of our phenomenal speakers, like in a package that they could bring with them to the event, let's say. Well, there are expenses associated with it. Well, then I started to think about, well, we have vendors that sponsor MFA Live, that have booths there and sponsor lunches and all that jazz. Well, why couldn't we have somebody sponsor some of our mailings, right? And why couldn't we sell a sponsorship opportunity to for somebody to do a ride along, to add something into that stick? Or maybe even what we do is maybe we interview one of the sponsors, make sure they give really great content, and then we send that out as part of the campaign to people that have registered already, right? And charging for that. And so it's phenomenal when you think about, and I think it's Andres said, absolutely. Amazon did that with their servers. And it's kind of interesting because in the book, I think it was Rework. Is it Rework? From Jason, from the guys behind Basecamp. And they talk about in there companies that will resell or sell the byproduct of what it is that they create, right? Like if they create, I forgot what they said. I haven't read that book in years, but I forgot there were like wood shavings or something, or rubber shavings. I forgot. Somebody might remember. Jen said, yep, that's it. Right, a company had this byproduct, and the company took the byproduct, that would normally just be trash, that like they would have to spend money on to get rid of, and now it became a source of revenue, a source of profit. And so, right, how can you turn your expenses, or how can you turn things from expenses into profit centers, right? And so leverage. And so Brandon said that's what Ford and Ocean Spray did. And there are lots of examples, right? There really are. I think Amazon is a great example of, they had so much extra server space that let's sell the server space. And so, so there you go. That is habit number 11, I think it is. Habit number 12, and then there's one more, kind of a bonus one. Habit number 12 is, that, and this might sound strange, or hard to believe, but the folks that I know, like I said, that are the big earners, the folks that I know that you would know, they don't set goals based on, they don't set outcome-based goals. They set really effort-based goals. And what I mean by that is that it's kind of like, what some refer to as process goals. They set goals for themselves goals for themselves in terms of what actions they're going to take, what tasks they're going to complete, right? The things that lead to the goal. It's kind of like, the best analogy or metaphor, if you will, is of weight loss, right? Of, rather than focusing on, right, simply I'm gonna lose 3 pounds this week. It's focusing on, I'm gonna burn this many calories. I'm gonna consume this many calories. I'm gonna spend this much time on the on the treadmill. I'm going to get in this many work sessions, workout sessions, so to speak. I'm going to eat this many meals or whatever. I'm going to take this many supplements. It's the process behind the goal. It's the process that leads to the outcome that you want, right? So here is where you can see the mixing of a habit like this, focusing on effort, not outcome, and self-discipline. Right here is where once you've written down the process, once you've decided on the process that you're going to follow to build your business, and the reality is this, that there is not one right process. Just like there is not one right marketing model. All of you have heard me say before, right? I have friends that are wildly successful that only do launches. I have friends that are wildly successful that only do or mainly do webinars. I have friends that are wildly successful that only do email content. Friends that are wildly successful that only publish books. Friends that are wildly successful that do VSLs and that's it, or long form sales letters, right? The reality is that it's not about the marketing model, right? At the end of the day, when it comes to, it's all about the marketing message. But when it comes to building a business, there is not one right method. Right. And so it's you deciding on what the plan is, right? What the process is, what you need to do each day, each month, right? Each week, each quarter. And we're going to be talking about that on Wednesday, and then having the self-discipline, developing the self-discipline, choosing to be self-disciplined when the option arises or the choice arises for you to procrastinate or you to do it, for you to take action and monitor your execution on your process goals rather than solely the outcome. It's fine to have the outcome. It's fine to know the outcome goal, right? But it's all about monitoring and measuring your execution, your discipline with the process goal. And the final one, the bonus one that I'm going to give you, and then if there are any questions, I'll stick around and take some time to answer your questions if there are. But the bonus one is really I got to see from my first mentor, and that is Frequent Getaways. So my first mentor in the health club business, a guy who was just wildly successful. And what I mean by that is not just financially, but he had an amazing family, was married to the same woman, only been married to her. Had 2 children. Both kids today are 2 boys, great kids, hardworking, married, with kids now so they have grandkids. He's got multiple homes all across the country, but he worked extremely hard and he played hard. And what I mean by that is that he took a vacation every 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks, he took time. He was, when I worked for him for whatever it was, I think 13 years. And he would take his wife away for anywhere from 5 days to 3 weeks, right? Now, I'm not saying for you to go away for 3 weeks, but at a bare minimum, you should be taking a long weekend. Take at least, a night, 2 nights away every 6 weeks. Give yourself something to look forward to every 6 weeks. Something for you to anticipate, something for you. You gotta reward yourself just as hard as you work. And so those are the 13 habits that are across the board in all the 7 and 8 figure earners I know. And so there you go. So let's see if there are any questions, and then we will roll. So David asked, tips on focusing on the process and effort and not getting discouraged when the outcome doesn't live up to expectations. I think that's a great question. And none of these things that I'm going to say, none of the things that I'll tell you, for any questions like this, are easy, right? Like, I'm not here to tell you that any of this is easy. Sometimes it's simple, but it's not always easy. I think that the answer to that question that David asks of, how do you focus on the process when the outcome doesn't live up to expectations? So there's 2 things that I would say. Number 1 is I'd always be careful of your expectations. That's first and foremost. I'm not a big believer in when I'll have, our CEO here, Damian Lanfranchi at MFA, he'll ask me sometimes, what do you expect? What do you think? What's your estimation on what we're going to do. And I always say, like, whenever he asks me that, like, he knows what's coming. I always say, like, I hate that. I'm not going to answer that question because I simply set myself up to be disappointed, right? Like, I'm setting myself up to be disappointed, because if I give a number and then we exceed that number, my response is typically always, oh, I just didn't set it high enough, or I set it too low, or but if I miss it, then I'm disappointed. And so unmet expectations are a tremendous source of discouragement. But the second thing, the bigger answer to that question is, David, is that you have to realize that certain things are in your control and certain things are really not in your control. And in this game, the results, the outcome, I know this is going to sound straight, the results, the outcome aren't in your control. You might be responsible for them, but being responsible for it and being like having control, like real control over it, over the results of like a marketing campaign, let's just say, you've got to recognize what you do have control over is getting back up on the horse. And the reality is that we're operating in a game, and listen to me carefully, every one of you. We're operating in a game in the direct marketing world, especially the direct response marketing world, but just marketing, direct marketing, where it's the reverse of the 80-20 principle. It's the reverse of the Pareto principle, meaning that you're not going to have 80%, you're going to fail 80% of the time. That's the best way to look at it. That's the healthiest perspective to take, that 8 out of 10 of your campaigns that you create aren't going to work. Right? And 2 out of 10 will. And the beauty is that with 2 out of 10 campaigns, 2 out of 10 campaigns working for you, you can become extraordinarily wealthy in this business, right? Like 2 out of 10 campaigns, you can become extraordinarily wealthy in this business. And so, so you just have to recognize that, and you just have to get back on the horse. Like David, I've had many failures, in terms of marketing campaigns. The reality is that I've had more failures than most people have had attempts, right? I've taken more swings at the bat than most people. I've taken more swings at the bat and missed than people have taken swings at the bat. That's why I admire a guy like Russell Brunson so much as an entrepreneur, and why I'm proud to call him a friend, because he's a guy that has failed publicly more than anybody else I know as an entrepreneur and gotten up every time. Most of you guys don't even know all of the things that he's attempted and not succeeded at, or whether businesses have gone south for him. But he keeps getting up and moving forward, and that's the same thing that you need to do. And you need to recognize, like I'm telling you here, and take my word for it. Please listen to me. There are very few intellectual giants in the marketing game. Right? There are really only 2 people that I've ever met that I'm proud to call friends, that I would say are just intellectually on a different level. Other than that, I have not met anybody else that I would say are intellectual, are bring something to the table that you or I don't. And so hopefully that helps, David. Kim said, thank you so much. This was really great. You're really welcome. Kim, Luke said, how do you balance the feeling of I have so much to do and every minute counts against the idea of getting away for timeout breaks? Oof, such a great question, Luke. I don't know if I'm the best person to ask, to be honest with you. This is something that at times I still struggle with. I could tell you this, a couple things. Number one, it's incredibly unhealthy. It's incredibly unhealthy to always feel like to always adopt the feeling or allow yourself to feel like you should be working and you shouldn't be taking breaks. Here's the reality. Here's the thing that you need to recognize. What you need to recognize is that as an entrepreneur, especially when you're in the startup phase, there will always be more work to do, right? So if you're waiting to take a break, to step away, to enjoy time with a spouse or someone that you love or care about, or do something that is going to help you decompress and relax. Like if you're waiting until you feel like there's nothing left for you to do, there's nothing else, that's never going to happen, right? It's never, ever going to happen. And so you've got to realize that it's okay to feel like there is a lot to do, but I will always have a lot to do. And me stepping away and taking a break is what I need to perform at my best as an entrepreneur, as an individual, in general. And so that's the mindset that you need to really just adopt, Luke, as it relates to how you like. How do you know what you should be doing, like, and what you should be focusing on, and that we're going to talk about on Wednesday night. But this whole idea of I have so much to do and every minute counts, right? And I shouldn't get away, or like if you've ever stepped away and you've sat down to eat lunch with somebody that you care about, and really they're talking and you're thinking about what you have to do, that is beyond unhealthy. I can tell you because I did it for so long. You have to consciously stop yourself and recognize that, number one, this is unhealthy. It truly is unhealthy, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And number two, the reality is that you have to accept that this is the new standard. The new reality is I will always have something else to do. There will always be more to do, and I will always feel like I have more to do. And so hope that helps. Luke. James said, how do you overcome the pressure of family and friends? People who don't know you, people who don't know you give you the opportunity to prove yourselves. Those who do may not give the same opportunity. How do you deal with that as an entrepreneur? I'm not sure what you're asking there. So how do you overcome the pressures of family and people who don't know you give you the opportunity to prove yourself? Those who do may not give you the same opportunity. I'm not sure what you're asking. Ask the question again, James, if you can. Adrian said, tips on how the learning process can sometimes bring you to a place of feeling overwhelmed because it brings you to the unknown. So I think there's a couple things, Adrian. So with that, so how do you learn but not allow yourself to get to the this place of overwhelm, right? So number one, you have to go into learning with a very specific idea of what it is that you want to know, right? So don't sit down to read a book without knowing first what is it that you're trying to get from the book, or what is it that you're trying to get from the video. First of all, always, it's very easy for you to fall into the trap of let me go to YouTube and start searching on marketing related things, internet marketing related things, copy related things. Don't do that, because that's not being intentional, right? You want to be intentional with what is the just-in-time learning that I should be doing, like Rich said, right? Like, what is it that I need to know now to take the very next step? Right? Or what is it that what is it like? All right, so it's this skill set that you have to have a very clear picture of what it is that you're trying to get from the learning that you're doing. And once you've gotten that thing from the learning, you move on, right? Like you have to recognize that not everything that you do as an entrepreneur requires mastery, right? Like you don't need mastery with copy to begin writing copy for your business. Like that's absurd, right? You don't need mastery with, setting up web pages to get a campaign up or a VS. You don't need mastery with video to get a video sales letter up. Just like you don't need mastery with leadership, if there is such a thing as mastery with leadership, to begin hiring people. So you just need to go into the learning process with a clear outcome, that, a clear result, a clear point that you want to learn. And then once you've got that, you move on. Don't make the mistake of, all right, so I learned what Bob said about X. Now let me see what Tim says about X and what Sheila says about X, and so on, right? Don't do that, because what you're going to get confused by all the different, if you're looking for mastery and you're looking to develop mastery over time, because it's a skill set that, right, you've got a long time horizon and you want mastery for copy, that's okay. But if you're learning something that you need to know how to do to take the very next step in your business, learn from one source. Do your homework on identifying the best source to learn from, and then learn from one source. It's just like, look, you could study any aspect of marketing, and if you could study 5 different people and you will get 5 different approaches. And you know what'll happen? You'll be completely confused. And so master one thing at a time. Master one thing at a time from one person. If you're learning from one mentor at a time. Don't have 5 different mentors. Don't have that will lead to overwhelm and confusion. That the other thing too is for most of you guys and gals, the reality is this, that yes, there are some 35 different traffic channels that you could leverage today. The reality is start with one, right? Like start with one. Like start with one, nail one. Use Facebook or use Google AdWords, right? Like start with one. Don't try to like you're learning how to set up an E5 campaign, right? Use the E5 camp method. Don't worry about anything else. The reality is, truthfully, you don't need anything else. But before you even think about adding in another component, whether it's the ask method, whether it's a product launch using the E5 campaign, like you nail one thing at a time. I've said before, and I'll say it again. My friends over at Agora, and ironically, excuse me, tomorrow I'm flying out to Baltimore for the day to meet with one of the divisions of Agora, and then I'm flying out again the following week. Right? Agora is a great example of this because Agora is great at just a couple of things, and they drill deep with those couple of things. They focus on just a couple of things. You don't need to be a wizard at 12 different things. You need to focus on one thing at a time. Jen said, so your clear vision and the why behind your clear vision aren't outcomes. They're more abstract. So the clear vision is this picture of kind of like, like, look, if you took a step back, this is one of those questions that most people never even think about. Like if my life, like if in the future, 5 years from now was perfect, what would it look like? Right? If 5 years from now was perfect, if everything was great, if it was beautiful, if it was perfect, what would it look like? What would my days look like? Right? Where would I be living? Who would I be living with? Like, what would that look like? Right? And that's what you're ultimately trying to do. We're not, I'm not like, look, for me at least, the vision is not, I've got, $733.52 in my pocket, right? Like it's not, but this is what my life looks like. This is how I spend most of my days. This is how I spend most of my afternoons. This is how I spend and where I spend most of my nights. These are the vacations that I'm taking my kids on, or the experiences that I'm taking my kids on. And so it's more of a picture. The why is just, what is it that's so important to me about what it is that I'm trying to create, right? So, and I think that, first and foremost, I think you need to have, Jen, a strong purpose behind your grand vision, but you should also really focus on the why, the purpose, really behind everything that you do. The reality is it's kind of, think of it like this. You guys and gals have learned, the difference between features and benefits, right? And the different types of benefits. You learned, a feature is a fact about the product or service, and the benefit is what it does for the prospect. Well, that's really, it's interesting that, we do that for prospects in our marketing, but we often don't do that for ourselves when it comes to thinking about, I'm rolling out a new VSL. Well, why are you rolling out the new VSL? Why is it so important? Why is it so important to you to do this? What does it mean for you? And I don't necessarily mean like, well, it's because it's going to help grow my business. But then and why is that so important to me? Well, it's important to me because it's going to give me, and you'll eventually get to, maybe it's like for me, I'll tell you, me personally, very early on, the thing that drove me was autonomy. It wasn't the money, right? Like it was autonomy. I always wanted to be able to set my own schedule. I wanted to be able to get up when I wanted, eat lunch when I wanted, eat lunch where I wanted, with who I wanted, like work as long or as short as I wanted, take vacations when I wanted. Like I didn't want to answer to a boss. I didn't want to be told when to do anything. That's what drove me. And so when I thought about like, well, what's going to happen if I don't, if I don't take this, what's going to happen if I don't send out my first email, or I don't write these emails? Well, what's going to happen is ultimately it's going to go back to, right, my business isn't going to fail and my business isn't going to succeed. And right, what's going to happen is I'm going to be working for somebody else, right? I'm not going to have that autonomy, right? And so it's important enough for me. I want that autonomy, and that's why I'm doing it, right? Just like the reason why the feature is valuable is because of the benefit for the benefit of the feature. So Mel said Sylvester Stallone set his expectations, as did Arnold. Don't be afraid of missing the goal. Just go for it. So don't misunderstand me, Mel. I'm not saying don't set a goal. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have to be careful with the average individual really has to be careful with what it is that their expectations, because it's unmet expectations as an entrepreneur that has that will hand you the greatest level of discouragement. The reality is that your focus needs to be on your performance. Like I'm gonna rock this. I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna deliver an incredible webinar. I'm gonna put together an incredible presentation. I'm gonna rock the house. I'm gonna write incredible copy. But I'm not gonna set expectations of we're gonna do right 1.3 million in the first 4 hours of this launch, because because at the end of the day, my expectations don't matter, right? Like my expectations of what happened that doesn't change anything, right? At the end of the day, and so Andre said, how do you keep the why in front of you every day to maintain motivation? I think that you should, at a bare minimum, I think that I always start my day with about an hour of time in the morning I usually read in the morning, and I have some alone time, a little bit of planning time, and reflective time. And kind of during that reflective time, that's when I'm reviewing my kind of objectives for the year and really why I'm doing what it is that I'm doing. And so you've got to keep it out in front of you, like at a bare minimum, physically keep it out in front of you. And Cullum said, thanks so much, Todd. So important to have this stuff spelled out again. See you Wednesday. You got it. Awesome. Peter said, thank you for that. Mel said, good stuff. Simon said, Todd, thanks for this webinar. This webinar is what's missing in my business success that I don't even realized. Sonali said, Sonali, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Is there a method for finding leverage that works well? How to approach it? I don't know of a specific method for leverage. And let me say this, let me say this, and this is important. And so get this, right? And this was really, my eyes were really open to this when I had the chance the first time to really work on something with Jay Abraham. And Jay is arguably the highest paid marketing consultant alive today. And Jay is a guy that I would dare to believe that he's always been this way, but he's certainly this way today. That he's a very resourceful individual. And Jay is an example of somebody who doesn't rely on resources. He's resourceful, right? And I share that because, so I get the question that Sonali's asking, right? About is there a method for finding leverage? But I think it's more important that you look for leverage and keep your eye out for opportunities to leverage rather than having a specific method. I don't have a specific method per se. And I think we could certainly talk about, if you're talking about, let's just say, for content, for things like that, there are definitely specific methods, like a great example. I'll tell you this, let me give you an example. And this isn't really going to answer your question, but this is at least an example of leverage. So when we were publishing the Conversion Snaps newsletter, we just ended Conversion Snaps, I think after a year of issues. The way Conversion Snaps was created, it was a physical newsletter that got mailed out. The way that got created was I created a keynote slide deck. Usually it had about 6 to 8 slides in it, and of whatever, 3, 4, 5 different conversion snaps, little conversion hacks that you could pop into any campaign. And I recorded it, I recorded the video of it. Once the video was recorded, right, it usually took me about 25 minutes or so to record it. And I usually just turned on the ScreenFlow. I use a Mac and recorded my audio, my mic with the keynote slides. Then what happened was that once that was done, the audio got extracted out of that video. So the audio just got extracted out. The audio was sent over to Rev.com. So Rev.com transcribed it. They sent it back. The transcript then went over to an editor that we work with, Debbie, awesome, like awesome editor. Debbie's the only one that I've ever allowed to edit my my copy or content. She edits it, and then it went over to our designer, and then he laid it out, and then it went really from mainly it went from him to the vendor, really. So if you think about it, right, like we had a video, we had an audio, we then turned it into a PDF, a digital thing, and that PDF then got printed and mailed out, all from me, call it spending an hour of time, 30 minutes putting together the slide deck, and then another 25, 30 minutes recording it. And so I'm just constantly looking for leverage, and it's just something you have to be open and attuned to. Ashley said, we allow ourselves to sleep when there is more work. Same applies to time away. It's healthy. Absolutely, Ashley. Luke said, cheers, Todd. Love your work. Great tips. Awesome. Tony said, I'm just struggling with understanding how to do the video webinar aspects of this. I'm relying on others because I don't know how to make these things happen. And I'm struggling with finding people that I can afford to do it for me. It's why I'm not going forward, even though I know I have to. Tony, what I would say is this. That the reality is that there's no part of this business. This is the brutal truth. There's no part of this business that you need to pay somebody to do for you. There really isn't, especially when it comes to anything related to tech, like recording a VSL. The truth of the matter is that today you can record a VSL with free tools. You could literally get OpenOffice, right? And then there's a free screen capture software. And the truth is that learning how to use anything, you can go over to YouTube, right? Check this out. You want a lesson of this is right. And I think, I don't know if I shared this with you guys and gals, but so check this out. So we went, during the launch for the E5 Camp Masterclass. So, I hired a video team, right? And forget what I do today, because when I first started, right, like I only started with $850, right? Like when you run your business, listen to me, when you run your business, you either have to invest your time or money, right? If you don't have the money, you have to invest your time in learning, time in doing, right? So when something has to be done, you either invest your time, in doing it. You might first have to invest time in learning it and then doing it, or you invest money to have other people doing it. When I first started, I didn't have the money, so I invested time and I learned how to do things, and then I did them, and I learned the best that I could, and then I did it. If I could show you today some of the things that I did back then, you'd be horrified in terms of how terrible it looked and how ridiculous it looked. But the reality is everybody starts that way. Right? Like everybody starts that way. And so you don't like I've said this before, don't compare first of all, don't compare yourself to what I'm doing, or to what Frank Kern is doing, or to what Russell Brunson is doing, right? That's like comparing apples to oranges, right? That's like comparing your startup to what Apple is doing. That's a mistake, right? You're not competing with Apple, and you're not trying, and you don't have to be where Apple is right now. And so, I hired this video team. I got a special location on the west coast of Florida. And so I drove to the special location to do this video shoot. Like I found this location that I wanted to do it at. We booked it. We brought in the video guys. The video guys used a boom mic, right? And I thought, instead of a lavalier mic. And when I got the audio back, it was horrific. Like the echo was just terrible. It was just horrible. The worst I've ever heard from a professional recording. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just recorded, I spent an entire day recording these launch videos, and the audio was terrible. Like, what am I going to do now? Am I going to go back and re-record them again? And like, don't ask. Like I had, wardrobe and blah, blah, blah. And so I said, you know what? I want to see if I can clean up the audio. Immediately, I don't know how to use Adobe Audition. I didn't even own Adobe Audition. I didn't know. But I said, you know what? Let me go buy Adobe Audition. Let me see. Let me get a trial thing of Adobe Audition. And then let me go over to YouTube and see if I could, if in an hour I could learn enough to try to clean up this audio myself. And that's exactly what I did. It took me a little bit longer than an hour to learn how to clean it up. And I had to buy a plugin for Adobe Audition, but I learned how to use the basics of Adobe Audition, and I learned how to install this plugin in there, and I learned how to clean up the audio. It's why I tell my team all the time, and this might sound brutal, but this is just the reality, and you've got to accept it, that, right? There's nothing that you can't learn today. There's nothing that you can't learn today. It's so much easier today. Years ago, I had to pay $1,000 to learn how to put video online when video came onto the scene years ago. Today, it's so easy compared to what it was. And the beauty is that you could learn it all on YouTube, right? Like you really can. And so James, so hopefully that makes sense. Let me see. Did I answer that question? Yeah. So hopefully that answered the question, Tony. James asked the question earlier about how do you deal with family who don't believe in you? This is going to sound harsh, but I don't really care who believes in me. Right? Like at the end of the day, if you've got a dream, James, nobody may believe in you, and that's okay, right? As long as you believe in you, that's all that counts. And so the fact that they don't, that they don't believe in you, you're not alone, right? Like you're not alone. And so I wouldn't even worry about that. So Simon asked, how do you develop self-discipline? Awesome question. You develop discipline, you develop discipline on a moment by moment basis, meaning like you develop discipline every time you know that you should do something and you are like, do I do it or do I just procrastinate? Like, and you have to you have to be self-honest, meaning like you have to be honest with yourself. Like you can't don't try to justify or rationalize your behavior. If you're procrastinating, say it. Call yourself out on it, right? Like as if you were put in charge of somebody else, you were their coach and you were there to tell them when they were on the right track or they were off the right track. You would tell them if they were procrastinating. You'd call them on their BS. Well, you need to do the same thing with your own behavior. And every time you're faced with that option of doing what it is that you're supposed to do, or procrastinate, it's one choice at a time. It's one moment at a time. It's almost like what you would tell somebody who's quitting, tobacco. It's hour by hour. It's every hour that you choose not to smoke or whatever, is you getting closer to being strong enough to like where the urge to smoke is less than the urge to not smoke, so to speak. And so it's really just a moment by moment. The thing that I would say to you, Simon, too, the other little thing is that if you struggle, like when it comes to your to-do list, if you will, like, you've got 12 things and you're overwhelmed, and that drives you to procrastinate. First of all, you got to become aware of what drives you to procrastinate. And you've got to start to ask yourself, like, is it the fact that I've got 12 things on this list? Like, what if I had 2 things on this list? Would I procrastinate? And I say that because usually there is a link between the amount of tasks, and procrastination. And so you may want to start by cutting back on what's on your list. Like, I'd rather you have 3 things on your list that you get done and you begin to build up that habit and you begin to build up that momentum and you begin to build up self-esteem and you begin to feel like an achiever because you are achieving, rather than you have 10 things and you get, 5 done, but there are 5 undone and you feel like, a lazy bum at the end of the day. And so I hope that makes sense, Simon. Tony said, the question is, how would you tackle this? How would you tackle this and the overwhelming feeling of helplessness? I'm not sure. Hang on. Let me see if there are so many questions. Let me see. Gosh, I want to see if it's hard to hang on. Developing. Okay. So let me see. Jolynn said this whole webinar is top notch. It's not brutal. It's a get real message. No excuses. You really can learn anything. It's all on YouTube. So true. And look, this is not my area of right. I'm not a motivational speaker. Like I'm not a life coach. I'm just sharing with you guys in the most honest way that I possibly can what it is that I've seen in my friends and colleagues that are wildly successful, and kind of the things that I've done that have helped me as an average dude from New Jersey to experience a pretty nice level of success. James said, these are the conversations that are hard to come by when just getting started with this stuff, especially when you are the only one in your immediate social circle doing something like this. Thank you, Todd. You know what's going to happen, James, and you're so welcome. You know what's going to happen? Mark my words. If you stay with this, right? Like I am living proof of, and I know it sounds cliche, but I am living proof that you don't have to be a genius. Like you don't have to be an intellectual beast. You don't have to be somebody with tech skills. When I started, I just knew how to send an email. That was it. I grew up playing on like the Atari and, and then Sega Genesis. And that was the extent of my tech, expertise. But you learn and you grow. And my perspective was always this, that if other average people can do it, then I can do it. Right? Like we're not talking about something that requires, genetics or God-given talent. These are things that you can choose to do. Andre said the rule of 5 helps with self-discipline, doing just 5 things every day that will move your project forward. It's funny that you should mention that because there's some, I forget, there was a study of some of the more or most successful CEOs, and they talked about like on average, I think the most successful CEOs had a daily to-do list of just like 3 to 5 things. That's it. And so, and we're going to talk a little bit about that on Wednesday. The Success Principles by Jack Canfield covers this, and 60 more principles in detail. Andre said, thank you. Selena said, Mel Robbins just wrote a book called The 5-Second Rule that is great for people who struggle with self-discipline. It's a super simple method that can get you up and moving immediately. Very cool. Thanks for the recommendation. Let me see. Katana said, thanks for this. I was supposed to launch my membership today and was feeling a bit discouraged. Yeah, like, and you know what? Like, look, understand this, that, don't think that, when you, first of all, let me say this, like, you can start to feel, I was, I had made a lot of money, right? Like a lot of money. And at the time, right, in the 7 figures, and I still wasn't feeling successful, right? I have no idea why. I could have been at the time comparing myself to the other kind of marketers or entrepreneurs that I heard were, doing 7 figures per month or whatever it is. But you have to be very careful that you don't buy into this, like, like the most successful entrepreneurs that don't have struggles, right? I know I have struggles, and some of the most successful people I know, which, like, again, and most of the folks that are the most popular marketers, I know I've either worked with, I've coached or consulted with in some way, or I've partnered with on a project, and they almost all have struggles. And so what you've got to recognize is that it's okay to be discouraged. It's okay to be upset as long as you keep moving forward. It's okay to be afraid as long as you keep moving forward. That's the difference, right? That's really the definition of courage. It's not the absence of fear. It's taking action despite fear. And so it's okay to be afraid to get on a webinar. Just get on the webinar, right? It's okay if you're afraid. It's okay if I remember hearing that, Johnny Carson, the late night host, used to vomit for years before he went out, right? You wouldn't think that, but at the end of the day, even in face of that fear. Thanks, Todd. Amazing info. That should be on every entrepreneur that wants real success. Very cool. Theodore said, thanks, Todd. Great advice. You're very welcome. Douglas said, thanks for doing this. You're very welcome. Adrian, thanks so much, Todd. James said, expectations are not actions. Yeah, yeah. And so let me see. I think that is it. Lena said, thanks so much, Todd. Very helpful. It's truly amazing what you're giving us in the E5 program. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to end with this, for you guys and gals, that, oh my gosh, I mean, I can't say it enough. Like it's going to change your life. And right, I don't need to say that. I don't, right. You're in the program, right? You're in the program. I'm telling you that it will change your life. And so I'm asking you, please, because I know what it will do for you. Please, because I know what it's not only done, forget me, but I know we have more case studies and testimonials of people's lives that have been radically changed than any other program I have seen out there. And I do not say that lightly. And so please just continue to stay focused, continue to go through it. Don't worry about, Shirley said I thought I was the only one struggling. Yeah, me and you, Shirley. And look, as you become successful, you have different struggles, right? You have different, you have different struggles. Back, when I first started, it was cash flow. It was getting my first sale. It was getting my second sale. It was learning new things. And then it evolves over time. And then it becomes, there's too much demand. There's not enough time. You can't fill a particular role the right way. There's just different issues that you have. That's okay. I'll tell you that your job as an entrepreneur is being a problem solver, right? Your job as an entrepreneur is being a problem solver. And so you've got to recognize that as a problem solver, that means there are going to be problems. There's going to be issues. There's going to be obstacles. That doesn't mean you're not a good entrepreneur. That means you are an entrepreneur, right? You are an entrepreneur when you're faced with obstacles and ups and downs, and we all face them. And you've just got to continue to take steps forward. Continue to move forward. Don't stop. Don't let up on yourself. Continue to believe in yourself and rewatch this when necessary. And recognize that I'm here for you. I'm in your corner. And if I can do it, you can do it. And so with that, that's all she wrote for tonight's training. I will see you guys and gals on Wednesday night for our next training. Super excited. That one is all about time management, productivity, just great stuff. We're going to get hardcore with that as well. And then, of course, on Friday is the 25 golden gems, the marketing lessons, the best, most valuable marketing lessons that I've learned over the last decade and a half. And so with that, talk to you guys and gals then. Everybody have a great night. Talk soon.